So I've spent the better part of 30 years in enterprise software, and the last 8 years as the COO at SAP's North American cloud business. I am super excited about this topic, and what a privilege to be with two titans in the industry. Daryl Roberts, which you almost need no introduction, but CIO DLA, and Tom Bruss. Maybe Tom, you can. Yeah, just a little bit. Maybe.
Okay, yeah. So hi everybody, my name is Tom Bruss. I'm part of Accenture. I'm part of our ServiceNow business group, but I have a bit of a unique role in that I also have responsibility for Accenture's own internal ServiceNow implementation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we manage all that today.
Perfect. All right, we have 30 minutes, 8 questions, 4 minutes per question. Think of it as like speed dating here, so we'll keep it real tight and exciting. Daryl, this first one is for you. So legacy ERP has been the foundation for core business services for 50 years. Right. Do you think it's ready for the next 50 years?
I would say no. I will tell you from our journey with our ERP within DLA, we realized our legacy ERP, we weren't really using the ERP itself because of government compliance, regulations, unique business processes, things we do from a government perspective. We did a lot of customization to the ERP, which as you look at that technology lifecycle of ERPs, it took us off that path. So for us, moving from our legacy ERP to the next generation of ERPs, platforms like ServiceNow are important to our journey.
Awesome. Daryl, we're going to keep the spotlight on you, do you have something to add? Awesome. We'll keep the spotlight on you for just a second. ERP systems, as we know, have grown pretty unwieldy. Customizations, cost to maintain. What are some of the technical and operational challenges that you've had to overcome? And how does this affect your efforts to improve government efficiency?
Yeah, I'd say security vulnerabilities from a DoD perspective, that's first. We want to have a secure system. And one of the things that we talk about with our ERP system, when you talk about Department of Defense, you think about weapon systems, planes, tanks, things of that nature. But the first thing that moves before any of that is logistics, it's data. And that comes from our ERP. And so making sure security is tight from a vulnerability perspective. You got to consider things about your data migration. So most ERPs that are moving forward in their technical implementation, those data schemas are no longer valid that we've been using for the past 10, 15 years. So how do you have that data consistency as you do that transition and that migration moving forward? The other thing, the biggest thing for us also, it's thinking differently about your business. How do you do business process reengineering so that you're using the technology for what it was built for and not trying to use it for how you like to operate? So that innovation, that agility in terms of how you do business is a big part of that as you look at the legacy ERP moving into the future. And then the last thing, but probably most important, change management and culture. So, your culture will eat strategy for breakfast every day. It doesn't matter your plan. If culturally you haven't done the right change management or prepared the workforce, your employees for that change, and it's not a top-down leadership-driven change, those are things that will impede your ability to modernize your ERP.
Awesome. Thank you. And Tom, maybe we'll get from both of you on this question, but we're going to maybe switch gears a little bit to talk about solution and business outcomes. And we hear the term ERP modernization a lot. Yep. It would be great to get a little bit of clarification. How do you define ERP modernization in your world? And maybe, Daryl, you can describe it in your world as well.
Well, I'll definitely establish the industry definition for ERP modernization. Now, I think you could talk to 10 different people and get 10 different answers. As you mentioned, ERP systems have been around for a long time. At Accenture, we've been an SAP customer for 20, 25 years now. And during that period of time, we've accumulated a lot of customizations, a lot of technical debt. And so if I were to talk to my SAP colleagues, they tell me it's all about clean core, get back in the box, and then shift to more of a modern architecture, get out of on-premise into the cloud. And that's fine. Those are all things you need to do. But I think it's an opportunity to step back and playing off some of the themes that Daryl mentioned. It really is an opportunity to take another look at your processes, right? So if you think about your ERP system, there are a lot of, maybe that lives with finance, but there are a lot of processes in your ERP ecosystem that span not just finance, but IT, procurement, HR, and multiple systems as part of that. And so we look at it, in my point of view, it's an opportunity not just to, get more standardized and eliminate technical debt, but it's an opportunity to reinvent your processes and reinvent your business and, figure out what really are those processes that belong in that core ERP system, and they're used by a few people, and what are those broader processes that are used by many people that belong in something like a system of work. At Accenture, for us, that's ServiceNow, but it may be different. So what are the things that, we can use as part of this modernization strategy to really make life easier for our employees, so when they're dealing with ERP, maybe they don't have to swivel chair between a bunch of different applications to get something done.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think as you do that, what's made it easy for our adoption, I'll call it just continuous process improvement. So in the government, traditionally, you deploy based upon your budget cycle, right? So you get approved for a 5-year budget, your program delivery is typically 5 years. And so we've changed that within what we do in DLA to where, typically I tell my team, hey, MVP within 12 to 16 months. And where possible, let's have full delivery in 2 years, right? Unheard of from a government perspective, but what I've found is we progress and do more from a BPR, business process reengineering perspective, looking at the business to prepare ourselves for that move and making sure we're aligned with the ERP journey, because you're not creating false stoplights or deadlines. Because if you say I have 5 years, you stretch the work out. And at the pace of technology changing today, what's needed in the world, we can't take 5 years, right? And that's part of the challenge of us working with our ERP partners and partners like ServiceNow. It's how do we get that exponential change that Chris spoke about this morning in his address more readily from a government compliance perspective, but from a business perspective as well, supporting the warfighter.
The way I would answer the question too is it depends on who you ask. If you ask an ERP provider like my alma mater, SAP, defining ERP modernization would simply be moving workloads to the cloud. That is the core part of their modernization strategy. And if you talk to a company like a ServiceNow, we would be more modernizing the business process. So it's an interesting, obviously I think the answer lies in both. Daryl, let's move a little things closer to home. So you right now run the nation's logistic combat support agency, and you are tasked to drive and sustain unmatched levels of warfighter readiness. What do you need in your ERP system today to accomplish that?
For us, we are truly using the ERP end to end. So when you look at our finance, our procurement, our distribution, our planning, we are truly using all the components that the ERP was built for. I think to build off your previous comment, part of what we've done from an ERP perspective, I will say it's not the centerpiece of what we do anymore. It's part of the platform. And so we've transformed this to really focus on the customer experience, the customer interaction, and the ERP becomes part of the ecosystem behind the scenes from a user perspective. And so how do we ensure the ERP is providing the right type of capabilities in those areas I mentioned earlier? But then how is it complemented by things like ServiceNow, by bots, and then ultimately using generative AI and agentic AI moving forward. And so the preparation for that for us was really investing in platforms, understanding the ERP is not going to support everything that we do, right? So how do we create that architecture, that platform that's going to be so closely integrated? It's seamless to the user in terms of that user experience, whether you're in the ERP, whether you're on a ServiceNow platform or another application that we have. So that's the first part of that preparation from a cultural organizational perspective. The second part of that preparation is well, how are we architecting the data across our platform? So how do we create those data standards so that as you move across the ERP, as you move across integration with service partners, international partners, our commercial partners, right? We're responsible for making sure government contractors get paid at DLA, right? That's not done through our ERP, but it's part of our platform architecture to ensure none of that breaks as we're modernizing. And so that gets to the incremental improvements that we're talking about. So that similar to your phone, right? I'll use the phone as an example. As you get the next upgrade to your phone, the user experience doesn't change drastically. It's small changes that you see over time. And so that's the approach we're trying to take at DLA. We're not going to do the flash bang. You leave on Friday, you come in Monday, and you have to learn a whole new system and a way to do business. But how do we incrementally improve that user experience, make it better, so that every day from a work experience, you get new technology, new capability to help you accomplish the mission.
Love it. Tom, for you and Accenture, you've kind of been on your own journey, and you've had quite a bit of success in what you've delivered. You support 750,000 employees. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you were able to achieve that, what the priorities that you set out, and how you guided your organization through that transformation.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to priorities, as Daryl said, user experience is kind of at the end of it. At the end of the day, what we're focused on. Another principle is, when working with the ERP system, it shouldn't all happen in a box in one department. You need to have everybody have a seat at the table, right? So I actually, as part of my ServiceNow program, have a cross-functional steering committee that has representation from all different parts of our business, so that as we're designing, what's next, what does that ERP modernization look like? We've got cross-functional representation, and it's not just finance in a box upgrading SAP, right? And I have a lot of examples of things that have sort of precipitated out of that, as we were working closely with finance, as they're cleaning their core. What are some things that, like, as I was saying earlier, stretch across multiple departments that make sense to put in a different system? And maybe just one example that I'll highlight. One of the applications we built for our finance organization as part of the modernization strategy was an automated invoicing solution, right? And you can imagine finance, their first thought wasn't, let's go to ServiceNow. In their mind, ServiceNow was that sort of ticketing tool, right? Why would invoicing belong in ServiceNow? But it used to be that our invoicing process was a highly manual process that required people swivel chairing between a bunch of different systems to try and get the data they needed. It required a lot of hand-holding from our CFMs in the finance organization, and ultimately leads to a lot of errors, right? And errors in billing are bad. And so we built an automated workflow in ServiceNow that sits across some of these systems of record, and it pulls in all the information needed to generate an invoice. So for example, it will go out to Salesforce, our CRM, to pull in client logistical information. It integrates with our time and reporting application to bring in things like billable hours. And then the user, all they have to do is view that, make sure all that information looks accurate, click a button, it generates an invoice, and it sends it back to SAP, which remains our system of record for finance and billing. So yet the user didn't have to swivel chair. They didn't need to call up their buddy in finance and have them walk them through the process. We took a process that was 3 days and shrunk it down to less than 3 minutes, and brought the number of billing errors down to essentially zero. And then finance that was kind of the light bulb for our finance organization, where it was like, oh, wow, there's these other things, 10 processes that we've been trying to shoehorn into our ERP, which really, play a lot nicer at that user experience level, which for us is ServiceNow.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. I know that sounds like it was also a career pathing move, and it got you into the role you have now a little bit, right?
Yeah. A lot of upset phone calls along the way too. Yeah.
So Daryl, you have a great success story with the implementation of Employee Center, the DLA Connect. This has been a home run for your group. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what DLA Connect is, why it was such a huge success?
Yeah, I'd probably say we probably borrowed something from Tom, because part of our goal that we've set at DLA, we're not trying to just be one of the best in federal government in how we support our customers, but industry-wise, who are the leaders and what are they doing, and why aren't we doing that within DLA? And that's really how DLA Connect was born, similar to what Tom described. We started off about 5 years ago, 3,000 plus applications. We did an apps rationalization, got down to about 100 applications. But as most of you know, in federal government, we have our cyber rules, and you don't log, if you're not active in a system within 30 to 60 seconds, we log you out. And in what we do in DLA, people are having to be in multiple systems at a time to support customers, to support the warfighter. And so we wanted to figure out a way to streamline that user experience for them, and that was DLA Connect, right? How do we allow them to log in once into DLA Connect on that platform, whether you're a DLA employee, another federal employee doing business with DLA, or an industry partner doing business with DLA? How do we allow you to go to this platform and just perform the functions and capabilities that you need to do with DLA, as opposed to knowing which system you have to log into to utilize that? And so part of DLA Connect is to allow that to happen. But the other thing we've done from a user experience perspective, we've made that customizable for each user. So what does that mean? If you're a finance person and you really need to go to finance applications on a daily basis, you can configure that on an individual level to say, hey, present these capabilities, the information on these systems to me every day when I log in. So you're not having to go search for what you need to go and do on a daily basis. The same from a vendor perspective. You want to check status of your payment, you want to look at requests for proposals, things of that nature. That's the vision. That's how we're going to incrementally improve DLA Connect. So that's customizable to the individual, as opposed to today, most government systems is to have or to have nots. If we didn't design it up front, you're not going to get it. So that's really been the driving point for DLA Connect. It's streamline that user experience, make it easier to do business with DLA. But then also it's helped us from a technical architecture perspective, streamline our data and IT infrastructure.
Daryl, maybe a follow-on question. You talked about the app rationalization piece of it. You've been able to quantify, what an annual savings in some program like this was?
So, and it's an old number, but last time we checked, when we looked at our overall apps rationalization, it was in the neighborhood of $20 to $30 million in savings. A lot of those apps were what I call people's homegrown applications that they built years ago that one or two people were using, but we had enterprise capabilities that now perform those duties. So we're able to shut down those rather quickly. The remaining 100 we have now, I call that everyone's firstborn, right? They're not gonna let go of that without a fight or a valid reason. But that's really been our savings from that perspective, about $20, $30 million that we're able to reinvest in our IT infrastructure.
Wow. That's huge. Congratulations. Tom, you have your own success story. DLA Connect 2.0, I think you guys called it Accenture Help.
Accenture Support.
Accenture Support.
Accenture Support, that is our DLA Connect.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe same if there is an opportunity to share what you saved through that program?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories. I mean, for us, it was about that employee experience, and we actually think about ServiceNow very similarly to DLA. And we've been on the ServiceNow platform for about 10 years now. Like most people, we started off in IT, but over time we've broken out and we're working with nearly every corporate function at Accenture at this point. We've implemented a lot of ServiceNows like out-of-box modules, HRSD, workplace service delivery, all the IT stuff. But we've also built 100, scoped applications on the platform as well. And all of those applications and out-of-box modules in aggregate enable over 1,900 cross-enterprise business services on the platform, right? And people can access all that through Accenture Support. So that is our destination for everything you need to do. We like to say it's a place where you can see all your requests, all your cases, all your incidents, regardless of which corporate function or functions in some cases under the covers are actually fulfilling those requests. And that's probably been the biggest transformational opportunity for us on the platform, is using something like ServiceNow as kind of that connective tissue, at that experience layer, tying together all these underlying systems. We integrate with a lot of systems under the covers, but in many cases what we're doing is abstracting the complexity from our employees, having to navigate to figure out, get things done. And I like to say, when you think about the things that you're doing and you need to do as an employee, should getting a new PC or reserving a conference room or going on a leave of absence, those are all just requests, and should you have to, it should all sort of just be a seamless destination. And these are all my employee needs, and for us at Accenture, we don't want our people spending time trying to navigate all that. We want people out doing what they do best, which is serving our clients. So, and then you start to take it a step further, right? You start to layer in the AI capabilities. It was our Accenture Support was our single destination for support and services, and now we've recently enabled the LLM virtual agent. We'd actually been using the virtual agent for a little while, but the virtual agent, pre-Gen AI days was a little difficult to work with, because every time you wanted to create something new to talk about, it was a 3-month development effort. So we actually, with the new LLM-enabled virtual agent, you can now have a natural language conversation, and we pointed it at our knowledge base articles. So we've got 10 years of knowledge base articles on the platform that now you went overnight, we went from 10 things you could ask it about to 10,000 things, right? And now the journey becomes, all right, well, hey, let's take that virtual agent, let's put that in Teams, which we're a big Microsoft shop. Let's have them, maybe they don't need to go to Accenture Support at all. They can get it in Teams, they can interact with it, where most of our people spend their time, and oh, by the way, now we're gonna layer on, the next step is conversational catalog. So I can use that virtual agent not just to ask it questions and give me support and recommend things, it can actually take me through the ordering process. And then you can imagine this all builds on itself. Now we've got agentic AI, so now the virtual agent's like, okay, I understand what you want. Let me go get my team of agents behind the scenes, and we'll take care of this for you. I'll come back and ask your permission from time to time, or what make and model of PC you'd like, but we'll take care of this for you behind the scenes. So, that's kind of the way that we're thinking about the platform. I will just, at this point, just put in a quick shameless plug. If people out there are interested in seeing some of this in action, please swing by the Accenture booth. We have something we're showing off called Agency Connect. That was actually kind of the foundation for DLA Connect. And it has a lot of these agentic AI capabilities built in. And we're offering this, to all of our government customers to help accelerate your journey to this real reinvented Gen AI-based process transformation.
That's awesome. Quick follow-on question to both of you on these two projects, Accenture Support and DLA Connect. From the time you ink the deal, how long to go live? Roughly.
So probably about 6 months.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
From the time we ink the deal for the Gen AI capability.
That's the initial capability, right?
Yeah.
Initially, yeah.
Because that's the thing, right? 6 months full operating, few weeks to get the initial out there, because you can't do flash to bang anymore. That is not the way to deploy IT and to do culture change. It has to be an iterative approach. And we had the business with us along the way, right? So from the time we had the concept to design, development, we had the actual users as part of that beta group, right? To actually test it as we were developing and building out DLA Connect, which allowed us to move a lot faster and make it more user-friendly on that initial deployment.
Awesome. All right, to both of you, with 6 minutes left, the hottest topic, AI. Tom, you kind of maybe ended on it. If I can ask you to start, just pick up where you left off. AI is on every roadmap.
Yep.
When you're making your decisions on how to choose the platform that is going to make it real for you, what's in your decision-making process?
Well, AI is going to transform businesses and governments around the world and the way that we all work. I think the three of us could have a healthy debate about how fast that's going to happen, right? But it's going to happen, right? And so at Accenture, we're embracing these capabilities, and I'd say there's probably three things we learned along the way. One is you're going to have to make some bets, right? Because you can't invest in every AI capability. Every platform, every company out there is touting AI capabilities. You really need to figure out where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of an AI investment. For us, we chose ServiceNow because we have 770,000 employees that are using this all the time for their needs, as opposed to not to pick on your alma mater SAP, but SAP, there's a few thousand people that use SAP, right? So we wanted to maximize the exposure, and so I would say for us, ServiceNow and Microsoft, because we live and breathe in that shop, those were kind of the areas where we felt, we could really start to maximize the investments that we're placing in these platforms and really get them out to our people quickly. And secondly was, as we were thinking about the technology, Daryl hit on it. The technology and the rollout was easy. The adoption is hard. And this is a muscle that all of our employees, all of us need to build, right? So you can't go from zero to agentic AI. It's gonna be hard for your employees to absorb that. So we rolled out some simple capabilities first. We started with our IT agents, pretty low risk use cases. We did things like case summarization and resolution notes, and that was fine, And then one day it's like, oh, hey, by the way, we can write a knowledge base article for you. Guess what? Everybody hates writing a knowledge base article. So they're like, wow, this is great. Look what it can do. The next step is, hey, let me recommend a knowledge base article for you based on this looks like what you're doing. And then ultimately it's like, hey, by the way, I think I've got this, based on the knowledge base article. Let me go resolve it for you. That's kind of the journey you're going on, and you need to bring people along the way. We also rolled this out to a bunch of our developers. Some of the text to code and text to flow capabilities. We really saw some productivity improvements there. And one of the things main lessons learned we heard from our developers was, I had to play around with how I asked it to develop the code. And that was an aha moment, because they're like, oh, they're prompt engineering. Like our agents, our developers, all of us need to learn how to become prompt engineers. I like to use the phrase that 20 years ago, we all learned how to Google something. Now we all need to know how to prompt engineer, right? So you really need to take your employees along the journey with you, start small, get them used to this, and then the third thing I would just say is you can't wait for perfection. Because I realized when you're trying to make, as I was trying to make the pitch to my CIO about investing in some of these capabilities, it can be hard to make a business case based on case summarization and resolution notes, right? But it's really more the vision. It's really more about getting that stuff out there, building that muscle, getting people used to these capabilities such that when the higher value use cases come, and they will come, our organization is poised to take advantage of it as quickly as possible. Same with security risks. I know that's a big deal for everybody as well. We at Accenture, we recognize, while we're embracing these technologies, we recognize the need to stay vigilant, right? And so we actually educate a lot of our employees. They all have to go through training, things like avoiding unethical prompting. If you notice something that doesn't look right, report it back. If we use it with a client, we have to use it within the client's guidelines. And even if you see some information surface that it looks like maybe that should be protected, we treat it as a security incident. You call the ASOC. And have them report it. So I guess, sorry, I've taken up a lot of the time here, but at the end of the day, it's just like, you can't wait for this to be perfect with a 6-month ROI, and you can't wait for it to be completely risk-free, because at the rate of pace of change, 2 years from now, we're gonna be on stage talking about autonomous AI, right? So you really have to jump in and start placing those bets.
Thank you. Daryl, take us home.
Yeah, I'd probably say, just to add on what Tom said, for us, maybe a little controversial, maybe not, focusing on strategic outcomes from an AI perspective when you're talking about the implementation, particularly from a federal perspective, from a cost perspective, you have to show that return on investment. And so not so focused on, hey, how can I get ChatGPT type things to every employee? That will come through culture change, that will take time. But really focus on what are those strategic outcomes that can show a return on investment early, that really justifies the need for further investment in AI. And the other part of that too is making sure people understand AI is not a replacement of the employee, right? This is actually a tool that's being provided to employees to enhance their skill set, their marketability. I use Amazon as an example. They're a ServiceNow partner as well, but probably one of the most advanced companies when it comes to AI, automation, things of that nature. But then also one of the world's largest employers, right? So this technology isn't to replace humans, but to enhance our ability to actually produce.
Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your partnership. And Coach K's words, thank you for letting us earn your trust. We appreciate it.
Thank you.